Hello guys, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can make a simple countdown timer. So we're going to need one text display, one oscillator component, one subtract component, one memory component, one signal check component, one button, and 6 wires. We're going to begin by placing the components. And now, the wiring. We're going to start at the oscillator component. We're going to take the signal out and put it into the signal in2 of the subtract component. And then the signal out of the subtract component into the signal in of the memory component. After that, we're going to take the signal out of the memory component back into signal in1 of the subtract component. Then we're going to go to the signal check component, signal in, and put it into the signal out of the button. Then back to the signal check component, we're going to take the signal out into the memory component signal in. And then we're going to take the signal out of the memory component and put it into set text in the text display. And now we're going to put in the numbers. We're going to start at the oscillator component. The output type is going to be a pulse, and the frequency is going to be a 1. As for the subtract component, we're going to have the clamp minimum to 0. And then the signal check component, the output is going to be the time that we want it. In this example, we're going to use 120 seconds. The false output is going to be nothing, and the target signal is going to be 1. There you go, a simple countdown timer. In this next part, I'm going to show you how you can make a double countdown timer in which the second timer begins after the first timer finishes counting down. So we're going to need one text display, one relay component, one subtract component, one memory component, two signal check component, and 9 wires. Combined with the first timer, the total is going to be 2 text displays, one oscillator component, 2 subtract component, 2 memory component, 3 signal check component, 1 relay component, 1 button, and 15 wires. Let's start by putting the components of the second timer. Next, we're going to be wiring them. We're going to start with the relay component. We're going to put a wire into signal in 1, and then go back to the oscillator component and put it into signal out. Then back to the relay component, we're going to take the signal out into the second signal in of the subtract component. Then we're going to take the signal out of the subtract component into the signal in of the memory component. And then the signal out of the memory component back into the subtract component signal in 1. And then we're going to go back to the memory component and take a signal out into the set text of the text display. And the signal check component above the relay component, we're going to take the signal in and put it into the memory component signal out of the first timer. And then we're going to take the signal out of the signal check component above the relay component into the set state of the relay component. As for the signal check component above the memory component, we're going to take a signal in and put it into the signal out of the button. And then we're going to take the signal out of the signal check component above the memory component and put it into the signal in of the memory component. Now we're going to put in the numbers. The subtract component is going to be 0 in clamp minimum. As for the signal check component above the relay component, we're going to have an output of 1, a false output of 0, and a target signal of 0. The signal check component above the memory component of the second timer, we're going to have the output to the time that we want. In this example, we're going to put 60 seconds. The false output is going to be nothing, and the target signal is going to be 1. And there you go. Double countdown timer. And now for the explanation. So the oscillator component is sending a pulse signal of 1 into the subtract component. And then the subtract component is subtracting from the memory component and then outputting that back into the memory component. As for the signal check component, it's connected to a button, so it resets the time every time the button is pressed. As for the second timer, whenever the first timer hits 0, the second timer starts counting down. And that's by the signal check component above the relay component. As for the second signal check component above the memory component, it is also connected to a button to reset the time whenever the button is pressed. Here's some tips you can use with the countdown timer. So I have an emergency siren and a wire. We're going to connect the emergency siren set state into the signal check component above the relay component signal out, so that whenever the second timer starts counting down, the emergency siren will start to alarm. Of course, you can do other stuff with the emergency siren. You can use a greater component and a memory component, or maybe even a regex component, so that you set the time in which the emergency siren alarms. For example, below 30 seconds of the second timer. Or if you wanted to, you can just put the siren in the first timer in case you made only one timer. Alternatively, you can connect the signal check components to the terminal rather than a button. And that's about it. Have fun.